serving men and women of God. Now, let me say this before we go any further. There are many of you, and it could be you watching now, maybe you've had really bad experiences with spiritual leadership and you're kind of done with the idea altogether of spiritual leadership. Like, I don't want anything to do with anything organized, any systems. That's a whole different lesson unto itself. Well, I acknowledge that some people are abusive, some people are controlling, some people are manipulative. I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that there's something to be said about serving under the ministry of a man or a woman of God. I know in my life I've benefited from this. Now, here's what happens. You begin to serve under a ministry. This is my story. I served under a ministry for years before I even had a conversation with the individual I was trying to receive impartation from. I'd go to the events. They'd hold them in stadiums. I would help clean up the wires for the cameras and help move chairs around. And whatever I could do to help, I would be there volunteering, working, just to be around that anointing. It wasn't until years later that I connected personally with the person who would help to mentor and guide me and disciple me in the ministry I now carry today. But the point is that what begins to happen, I want to say this right because I don't want you to miss what I'm saying. It's so key that you get this. And it could be the difference between you receiving from a man or woman of God and then not receiving from them. There are certain things about individuals that you will learn only as you get closer to them. Now, what I'm going to share with you is deeper truth. This may not be for everyone, but if you're ready to go deeper, this is for you. When you begin to serve a man or woman of God, whether that's from a distance or whether that's up close, doesn't matter. You will begin to see their humanity. Their humanity will begin to show in ways that you wish it wouldn't. From a distance, you look and you say, wow, look how anointed. And then you draw in closer and closer and closer as you serve. Now, I'm not saying that, we justify hypocrisy, nor have I necessarily seen hypocrisy. Thankfully, the people I've seen have displayed wonderful character, a heart for Jesus, a heart for God's people. So I have no misgivings there. And I'm not talking about spiritual abuse, spiritual control, those things. But what begins to happen is you draw closer and you're going to see a little impatience. You're going to see maybe a little harshness, sometimes, not in every case. Because nobody is perfect. Nobody is just like Jesus. Everyone has ways about them that could be more like Jesus. Everyone has something in them that God needs to correct and change. Everyone, including your heroes, including your leaders, including your pastor, including me. So what begins to happen is you start to serve, and now you're getting closer to them. You start to serve, and you notice little things. The humanity begins to show. And so when you saw them from a distance, you said, wow, look how anointed. And then you get a little closer and you go, oh, well, I didn't see that before. Oh, well, that's something I didn't quite notice last time. And then if you're not careful, you can allow bitterness to enter your heart. Now, let me be clear. I'm going to say this one more time and then I'll continue. And then I'll be released from having made this point. But I want to make sure you understand me so that I don't put you in a bad situation. I'm not talking about spiritual abuse. I'm not talking about manipulation. I'm not talking about hyper-controlling leaders who want to control every single aspect of your life. Here's a hint for you. If somebody ever tells you that you can't fulfill the call of God without them, you can fulfill the call of God without them for sure. If anyone ever tells you that if you leave them, you're cursed, they're lying, they're manipulative, and you should probably not walk but run away from that church or ministry, don't believe that nonsense. It's garbage. And they have to say that because they don't have the anointing to pull people in. So what I'm saying to you is legitimate, Jesus-loving people will have major character flaws that you didn't recognize before. And if you're not careful, bitterness can enter your heart. You can look at them and you can say, oh, well, I thought you were this and now I just see you're that. Or I thought you were up here and now I see that you're down here. Be very careful of the expectations that you place on your leaders. Now, the Bible does give us a standard. Obviously, if they're getting drunk after service, you're going to probably want to distance yourself from them. Obviously, if they're sleeping around with people who they're not married to, obviously you want to distance yourself from them. If they're stealing money from their ministries, obviously distance yourself. I'm talking about just character flaws here. I'm not talking about abuse. You'll begin to see those character flaws. And if you're not careful, that bitterness begins to enter your heart because you had unrealistic expectations for them, because all you ever saw was the mantle, but you never saw the man. All you saw was the power, but you didn't see the person behind that power. You saw the ministry, you didn't see them in everyday life. You watched them on a platform for an hour a week. You didn't get to know them every day throughout the week. And so what begins to happen is as you begin to serve under key leaders, your heart will become bitter if you don't have grace for them. Please hear me now. If you hear anything I say about this point, please hear this. If you don't have the grace for them, you will not have the grace to receive from them. If you do not have grace for them, you will not have the grace to receive from them. It's as if God, in His wisdom, has hidden the anointing behind major character flaws. Now, I'm not talking about disqualifying character flaws. I'm talking about major ones. And to be clearer, there's a biblical standard. If they're not meeting that, run. If they are meeting that, but they still have flaws, don't allow your heart to be bitter. They're human. And so we see things from a distance. Wow, how anointed. We move in a little closer. Oh, I had no idea you're like that. Now watch this. Here's what happens. From a distance, wow, how anointed. A little closer, I wish I didn't see that. Now watch this now. If you will give them grace, if you will forgive their flaws, if you will guard your heart against bitterness, God will draw you even closer. And the moment you're drawn closer to them, even after having witnessed their humanity, you're going to look at them and you're going to say, that's why God uses you. I see it now. And others won't see it. Others have a surface level knowledge of people that God has anointed. They don't really know. They hear things from other people. They hear things repeated. They hear mischaracterizations. They hear twisted words. They hear all sorts of things. But when you begin to see for yourself, that's a secret that I've learned. Now, I'm convinced that God hides the anointing. This is something I wrote here. I'll read it to you. I'm convinced that God hides the anointing in abrasive humanity. I'm convinced that God hides the anointing in abrasive humanity so that only the persistent can receive it. You must serve to God's satisfaction, not to man's. Conflict tests your heart. Conflict tests your heart. So that's number 4, honor and service. Finally, number 5 is proximity. Now let me show you this. This is quite interesting, what Paul the Apostle wrote in Romans chapter 1, verse 11. Now, keep in mind, Paul can write letters. Paul can send messengers. But look at what he says. This is so key. Romans chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. For I long to visit you so I can bring you some spiritual gift that will help you grow strong in the Lord. When we get together, I want to encourage you in your faith, but I also want to be encouraged by yours. Now watch this. For I long to visit, why? Why do I need to go visit you in person? Why do I need to go and be physically there with you? So I can bring you some spiritual gift. Wait a minute. Why not just write what you want to say in the letter? Why not just send the message through one of your disciples and send them to the church to bring it to them? Why? Because there are certain things that can only be deposited spiritually with close proximity and actual connection and relationship. Now, this isn't always